The foremost obstacle to the economic development of the underdeveloped countries is the vicious circle of poverty. Hi there, welcome back to my channel Educate with Milanjis. Today, let's study in detail about this poverty, the various types of poverty, and the various measures used to measure the poverty. Before we go any further, if you had not subscribed my channel, please do subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon for getting the notifications of my upcoming videos too. Also, like the video if you feel that the content was good and comment in the comment section for any further clarifications. So, without any further waiting, let's move on to a topic. In human terms, poverty means little to eat and bear and difficulty in meeting the basic requirements of life. In economic terms, poverty means the inability to attain a minimum standard of living. The minimum standard of living may vary from society to society, while the biological requirement and nutritional norms provide the most elementary concept of a minimum standard of living. But the modern understanding of poverty requires other factors such as school enrollment, infant mortality, immunization, malnutrition, women empowerment, etc. Poverty hence is pronounced as the deprivation in the well-being. There are mainly two types of poverty. Number one is the absolute poverty. It is the sheer deprivation or the non-fulfillment of bare minimum needs of existence of food, shelter, health or education. It is based on the absolute needs of the people, and the people are defined as poor when some absolute needs are not sufficiently satisfied. An absolute poverty line is based on the cost of minimum consumption basket based on the food necessary for a recommended calories intake. The second one is the relative poverty. It is related to the high income countries where the people are poor because they cannot maintain the consumption level equivalent to others in the society. There are differences in the standards of living among the people. The relative poverty line varies with the level of average income. Relative poverty is based on inequality and differences in the standards of living. Do you all know why should we measure the poverty? The answer would be number one, to keep the poor people on the agenda. Number two, to be able to identify poor people and so as to be able to target appropriate interventions for them. Number three, to monitor and evaluate projects and policy interventions geared for the poor people. And number four, to evaluate the effectiveness of the institutions whose goal is to help the poor people. The poverty can be measured in the following three steps. Defining an indicator of welfare for that society. Establishing a minimum standard of that indicator to separate the poor from the non-poor. Generating a summary of statistics to aggregate the information from the distribution of this welfare indicator relative to the poverty line. The measurement of poverty is needed to plan the policies to check global phenomena, and it can be measured through the following methods. Number one is poverty line. Under this method, people are counted as poor when their measured standard of living is below a minimum acceptable level known as the poverty line. The poverty line in India is defined as the level of private consumption expenditure which ensures a food basket that would supply the required amount of calories. Actually, in India, the Niti Aayog estimates the poverty on the basis of calories intake. The ICMR recommends 2400 calories intake for the rural areas and 2100 calories for the urban areas. The second method is the head count index. It is simply the measure of the proportion of the population that is counted as poor with respect to that of the total population. Now it can be simply denoted with the help of this equation: P0 is equal to NP divided by N, where P0 is the proportion of poor with respect to the total population, NP is the total number of poor in that country, and N is the total population of that country. The third method is the poverty gap index. It is the aggregate or average fall in the income of all the persons when taken from the poverty line. It can be denoted with the help of this equation: GI is equal to Z minus YI, where the GI represents the poverty gap. The poverty gap is equal to the poverty line Z minus the actual income YI of the poor individuals. It gives an indication of the depth of the poverty. This also indicates the amount which may be directly transferred to the poor persons to eradicate poverty from them. The fourth method is the squared poverty gap index, or it is otherwise known as the poverty severity. This is simply a weighted sum of the poverty gaps, where the weights are the proportionate poverty gaps themselves. For example, let's say a poverty gap of 10% of poverty line is given a weight of 10%, while one of 50% is given a weight of 50%. This in contrast with the poverty gap index, where the gaps are weighted equally. Hence, by squaring the poverty gap index, the measure implicitly puts more weight on the observations that fall well below the poverty line. The fifth method is the Foster-Greer-Thornback measure. This measure is sensitive to the problem of extreme poverty. It is the most commonly defined as the square of the poverty gap divided by the population. By using the square of the poverty gap, the FGT, or the Foster-Greer-Thornback measure, gives heavier weight than the PGI, that is the poverty gap index, to the poverty of the very poor, because all income gaps are square. The sixth method is Sen's method, which was proposed by the Nobel laureate Dr. Amartya Sen in 1976. It was proposed to combine the effects of the number of poor, the depth of their poverty, and the distribution of poverty within the group. It is explained with the help of this equation, which is PS is equal to P0 into 1 minus, in brackets, 1 minus GP into MP divided by Z, where P0 is the headcount index, MP is the mean income of the poor, GP is the Gini coefficient of the inequality among the poor, and Z is the poverty line. Today we had learned about poverty, the various types of poverty, and the various measures used to measure the poverty of a country. There is one more measure of poverty, which is the most comprehensive measure used by the majority of the countries. I assure you, I will take up that topic in the next video. Till then, please show your support by liking and subscribing the channel. Till then, auf Wiedersehen.